This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult with qualified health practitioners before making any health changes. This speech is designed to inspire and empower those who have been hurt, especially empathetic individuals, to view pain as a catalyst for personal growth. It highlights the importance of self-respect, emotional boundaries, inner peace, and self-awareness. Through life's challenges, listeners are encouraged to transform suffering into wisdom, embrace their true worth, and develop unshakable strength. The message reminds us that healing is not about becoming colder, but about becoming wiser, stronger, and more authentic.
Have you ever noticed how people underestimate the quiet ones? Especially the woman who gives with all her heart, listens without judgment, and carries the weight of others without complaint. Many mistake her kindness for weakness. Many assume that because she forgives, she will always stay the same. But there comes a moment when an empath is deeply hurt, a moment when disappointment becomes clarity, a moment when pain becomes wisdom, and what she does next shocks everyone. One of the most surprising things that happens when a female empath is deeply hurt is that she stops chasing. For a long time, she may have been the one reaching out first, trying to understand, trying to fix misunderstandings, trying to hold relationships together, even when she was the only one making an effort. Not because she was desperate, but because she genuinely cared. An empath sees potential in people. She sees the good hidden beneath flaws. She sees wounds behind harmful behavior. She sees reasons where others only see excuses. This ability to understand others is a beautiful gift, but when it is not balanced with wisdom, it can become a heavy burden. Many people do not realize how much energy an empath invests in the people she loves. She listens when others are speaking. She remembers what others forget. She notices changes in moods, shifts in emotions, and silent struggles that no one else pays attention to. She gives her presence, her compassion, and her heart freely. Yet there comes a point when she begins to recognize a painful truth. Not everyone values what they receive. Not everyone appreciates what is given without conditions. And not everyone deserves unlimited access to her energy. The moment this realization sinks in, something begins to change within her. It is not anger. It is not hatred. It is clarity. Clarity is powerful because it removes illusion. It allows a person to see reality exactly as it is. A hurt empath starts looking at relationships differently. She no longer focuses only on what people say. She pays attention to what they consistently do. She stops creating stories to justify disappointing behavior. She stops convincing herself that things will magically improve if she simply gives more. She starts understanding that healthy relationships require mutual effort. This is where many people become shocked. Kinkle force. They expect her to keep trying. They expect another message, another chance, another sacrifice. And they expect the same endless patience they have always received from her. But instead, they are met with silence. Not the silence of resentment, the silence of self-respect. For perhaps the first time in a long time, she begins choosing herself. Choosing yourself is not selfish. Yet many empaths struggle with this lesson because they have spent years prioritizing everyone else's needs. They have learned to be available for everyone except themselves. They have learned to extend compassion outward while neglecting their own well-being. The result is emotional exhaustion. When a female empath decides to choose herself, she starts asking different questions. Instead of asking, "How can I make them stay?" she asks, "Why am I afraid to let go?" Instead of asking, "What more can I give?" she asks, "What do I need right now?" Instead of asking, "How do they feel about me?" she asks, "How do I feel when I am around them?" These questions change everything because they bring awareness back to where it belongs. Many people spend their lives trying to control the actions of others. An empath who has awakened from pain understands that this is impossible. She cannot force someone to appreciate her. She cannot force honesty. She cannot force respect. She cannot force effort, but she can decide what she will tolerate. She can decide where her energy flows. She can decide who has access to her time, attention, and heart. This decision becomes the beginning of true freedom. As she chooses herself more often, she begins reconnecting with parts of herself that were neglected. She rediscovers passions she abandoned. She creates space for growth. She invests in her physical health, her emotional well-being, and her spiritual development. The energy that was once spent chasing unavailable people is now directed toward becoming the person she was always meant to be. And something remarkable happens. The emptiness she feared never arrives. Instead, she finds peace. She discovers that her worth was never dependent on someone else's approval. She realizes that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. She learns that solitude can be nourishing when it is filled with purpose. She begins enjoying her own company. She becomes comfortable with silence. She no longer feels the need to constantly seek reassurance from the outside world. The people around her notice the difference. They see a woman who is calmer, stronger, and more grounded. They see someone who no longer begs for understanding because she understands herself. They see someone who no longer chases because she knows her value, and that is when her true transformation begins. After a female empath stops chasing and begins choosing herself, another profound shift takes place within her. She learns to turn her pain into wisdom instead of bitterness. This is one of the rarest transformations a human being can experience because pain has the power to push people in two very different directions. It can make a person hard, resentful, and closed to the world, or it can make them wiser, stronger, and more conscious. The path an empath chooses after being hurt determines the quality of her future. When someone wounds an empath deeply, the pain is often greater than most people realize. She does not simply feel her own emotions. She carries the emotional weight of the entire experience. She remembers the words, the energy, the broken promises, and the moments when her trust was betrayed. Because she naturally seeks understanding, she spends countless hours reflecting on what happened. She examines every detail, searching for answers. Keknescent. At first, this process can feel overwhelming. The mind wants explanations. The heart wants closure. The emotions rise and fall like waves. There are moments when anger appears. There are moments when sadness takes over. There are moments when disappointment feels almost impossible to carry. But wisdom begins the moment she stops asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and starts asking, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" This question changes everything. You see, pain itself is not the enemy. Pain is information. It reveals where boundaries were missing. It reveals where expectations were unrealistic. It reveals where self-respect was compromised. It reveals where growth is needed. The problem is that many people become so consumed by their suffering that they never receive the lesson hidden within it. A hurt empath who chooses wisdom takes a different approach. Instead of allowing the experience to poison her future, she allows it to educate her. She begins observing her own. She notices where she ignored red flags because she wanted to believe the best in someone. She notices where she gave too much while receiving too little. She notices where she confused potential with reality. This awareness is not about self-blame, it is about self-understanding. There is a significant difference. Self-blame keeps a person trapped in the past. Self-understanding creates freedom. The wise empath understands that every experience carries a message. Every disappointment contains insight. Every challenge offers an opportunity to become more aware. Rather than viewing herself as a victim of circumstances, she becomes a student of life. This mindset is powerful because it transforms suffering into growth. Many people who hurt an empath expect her to become bitter. They expect her to lose faith in others. They expect her to become cynical and emotionally unavailable. But when she chooses wisdom, something unexpected happens. She does not become colder. She becomes clearer. She does not stop loving. She learns to love wisely. She does not stop trusting. She learns to trust with awareness. She does not stop giving. She learns to give without abandoning herself. This is the kind of strength that cannot be developed through comfort alone. It is forged through experience. Think about a tree standing in the middle of a storm. The storm does not ask permission before it arrives. The wind does not care whether the tree feels ready. Yet every storm strengthens the roots that survive it. In the same way, life's challenges strengthen the inner foundation of a person who is willing to learn. The female empath begins realizing that every painful chapter contributed to her awakening. The people who disappointed her taught her discernment, the betrayals taught her boundaries, the heartbreak taught her self-respect. The loneliness taught her self-reliance. Gradually, she stopped seeing painful experiences as meaningless suffering. She begins seeing them as preparation for greater wisdom, preparation for stronger character, preparation for a more authentic life. This perspective does not erase the pain overnight. Healing remains a journey. There will still be moments when old memories return. There will still be days when emotions surface unexpectedly. But now she meets those emotions differently. Instead of resisting them, she observes them. Instead of being controlled by them, she learns from them. Instead of allowing them to define her identity, she allows them to refine her character. That is the difference between bitterness and wisdom. Bitterness keeps wounds alive. Wisdom transforms wounds into lessons. One creates chains, the other creates freedom. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that she begins to understand something many people never discover. The purpose of pain is not to destroy her spirit. The purpose of pain is to awaken a deeper level of consciousness. Every challenge becomes an invitation to grow beyond who she was yesterday. As she embraces this truth, her energy changes. Her presence changes. She no longer carries the weight of resentment because she understands that resentment only extends suffering. She chooses learning over blame, growth over anger, awareness over reaction. Through this process, the pain that once threatened to break her becomes the very thing that teaches her how strong she truly is. That is when wisdom quietly takes the place of bitterness. As a female empath begins transforming her pain into wisdom, she naturally arrives at another life, changing realization. She learns to protect her energy without feeling guilty. This lesson is often one of the most difficult for an empath because her nature has always been to give, support, understand, and care. For years, she may have believed that being a good person meant always being available, always saying yes, always sacrificing her own needs for the comfort of others. She may have mistaken endless giving for love and constant availability for kindness. But pain has a way of revealing truths that comfort often hides. After being hurt enough times, the empath begins to notice a pattern. She notices how exhausted she feels after certain conversations. She notices how some people only appear when they need something. She notices how her emotional resources are constantly being drained by those who contribute very little in return. She begins to recognize that not everyone enters her life with good intentions. Some people appreciate her presence. Others simply consume it. This awareness can be uncomfortable at first. An empath is naturally compassionate. She understands that people have struggles. She understands that everyone carries wounds. Because of this, she often gives people endless chances. She tells herself that they are going through a difficult time. She tells herself they will eventually change. She tells herself they mean well deep down. Yet wisdom teaches her something important. Understanding someone's pain does not require accepting their behavior. This realization becomes, for perhaps the first time, she begins to understand that protecting her energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of responsibility. Just as a gardener protects a beautiful garden from weeds, she must protect her inner world from influences that continuously damage her peace. Many people feel uncomfortable when an empath learns this lesson. Why? Because they benefited from her lack of boundaries. They were accustomed to unlimited access. They expected immediate responses. They expected her emotional support whenever they desired it. They expected her understanding even when they offered little respect in return. When she begins setting boundaries, some people accuse her of changing, and they are right. She has changed. She is no longer willing to abandon herself in order to keep others comfortable. One of the greatest misconceptions about boundaries is that they are walls. In reality, healthy boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are gates that allow the right people in while keeping harmful influences at a distance. A boundary simply says, I respect myself enough to protect what matters. The female empath starts practicing this in small ways. She no longer feels obligated to answer every message immediately. She no longer says yes when her heart is saying no. She no longer explains herself endlessly to people who have already decided not to understand. Ciao. She no longer tolerates behavior that consistently disrupts her peace. At first, this can feel unfamiliar. There may even be guilt. That guilt often comes from old conditioning. For years, she may have been praised for putting everyone else first. She may have received approval for being selfless. She may have believed that her value came from how much she could give. But true self-worth is not measured by self-sacrifice. Okay? True self-worth comes from recognizing that your needs matter too. This understanding allows her to release unnecessary guilt. She realizes that every time she says yes to something that harms her well-being, she is saying no to herself. Every time she ignores her own limits, she teaches others to ignore them as well. Every time she tolerates disrespect, she silently communicates that her peace is negotiable. Eventually, she decides that her peace is no longer negotiable. This decision changes the quality of her life. Her mind becomes quieter, her emotions become more balanced, her relationships become healthier. The constant pressure to rescue everyone begins to disappear. Instead of carrying responsibilities that belong to others, she allows people to face the consequences of their own choices. She understands that growth. Sometimes the most compassionate thing she can do is allow others to learn their own lessons. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom. Many empaths spend years trying to save people who are unwilling to save themselves. They exhaust their energy attempting to fix problems that are not theirs to fix. They become emotionally depleted because they assume responsibility for burdens that do not belong to them. A healed empath learns a different approach. She offers support without carrying the weight. She offers compassion without losing herself. She offers kindness without surrendering her boundaries. This balance creates a remarkable inner strength. Again, people begin noticing that her presence feels different. She is still warm. She is still caring. She is still compassionate. But there is now a quiet firmness within her, a calm confidence, an unspoken message that says, I know my value and I will not compromise it. The most surprising part is that protecting her energy does not make her less loving. It makes her love more genuine because now her kindness comes from abundance rather than exhaustion. Her generosity comes from choice rather than obligation. Her compassion flows freely because it is no longer being drained by people who refuse to respect it. And in learning to protect her energy without guilt, she finally discovers that peace is not something she must earn from others. It is something she must choose for herself. Once a female empath learns to protect her energy without guilt, another powerful transformation begins to unfold. She starts embracing solitude and discovers her true power. This is often the stage that surprises people the most because many assume that an empath needs constant connection to feel complete. They believe she must always be surrounded by people, always giving, always supporting, always engaged in the lives of others. But after experiencing deep hurt and learning valuable lessons about her own worth, she begins to understand something profound. The greatest relationship she will ever have is the one she builds with herself. For a long time, solitude may have felt uncomfortable, not because she feared being alone, but because being alone forced her to face thoughts and emotions she had been avoiding. When life is filled with noise, distractions, conversations, and responsibilities, it becomes easy to escape self-reflection. Many people spend years running from themselves without even realizing it. They fill every empty moment with activity because silence makes them uncomfortable. But eventually, the empath reaches a point where she no longer wants to run. She wants to understand. She wants to heal. She wants to discover who she truly is beneath all the expectations, roles, and identities she has carried for others. Okay? So she begins spending time alone. At first, the experience can feel unfamiliar. The silence seems louder than usual. Old memories may surface. Unfinished emotions may rise to the surface of awareness. There may be moments when loneliness attempts to convince her that something is missing. Yet if she remains patient, something remarkable begins to happen. The loneliness slowly transforms into peace. This is because solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Loneliness is the feeling of being disconnected from yourself and others. Solitude is the conscious choice to spend time with yourself in a meaningful way. One drains energy, the other restores it. As the empath spends more time in solitude, she begins hearing a voice that was previously drowned out by the noise of the world. It is not the voice of fear. It is not the voice of insecurity. It is the quiet voice of intuition. For years, she may have ignored this inner guidance. She may have doubted her instincts. She may have trusted the opinions of others more than her own inner wisdom. But solitude strengthens awareness. When distractions disappear, clarity increases. She starts recognizing patterns she never noticed before. She sees how certain relationships affected her. She sees how certain decisions were influenced by fear of rejection. She sees how often she abandoned her own needs to gain approval. Most importantly, she begins understanding herself on a deeper level. Many people know the details of their lives, but very few truly know themselves. They know their job. They know their responsibilities. They know what others expect from them. But they do not know what exists beneath all those layers. The female empath who embraces solitude starts exploring those deeper parts of herself. She reflects on her values. She examines her beliefs. She questions habits that no longer serve her growth. She becomes curious about her own mind. And this curiosity becomes a source of strength. Instead of constantly focusing on external circumstances, she turns her attention inward. She begins developing self-awareness. She notices her emotional patterns. She observes her reactions. She learns what brings her peace and what disturbs it. This level of awareness is powerful because it creates freedom. A person who understands themselves cannot be manipulated as easily. A person who understands themselves does not need constant validation. A person who understands themselves carries an inner stability that remains steady even when life becomes uncertain. This is where true power begins to emerge, not the power of control, not the power of dominance, but the power of self-mastery. Self-mastery is the ability to remain centered when others lose their balance. It is the ability to respond instead of react. It is the ability to choose your direction rather than being controlled by circumstances. The empath discovers that this strength was always within her. The problem was never a lack of power. Frequency. The problem was that her attention was constantly focused outward. She spent so much time understanding others that she forgot to understand herself. She spent so much time caring for others that she neglected her own growth. She spent so much time seeking harmony around her that she forgot to create harmony within herself. Solitude changes this. The quiet moments become sacred. The time alone becomes productive. The stillness becomes a teacher. She begins reading, learning, reflecting, and growing. She develops discipline. She becomes more intentional with her thoughts. She invests in her physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Every moment spent in conscious solitude strengthens her foundation. Eventually, something extraordinary happens. She no longer fears being alone. In fact, she values it, not because she rejects people, but because she has discovered the richness of her own inner world. She realizes that solitude is not an escape from life. It is a place where she reconnects with life at its deepest level. People around her often notice this change. They see a calmness that was not there before. They see confidence that does not need attention. They see strength that does not need to be announced. They see a woman who is comfortable in her own presence. And that comfort becomes one of her greatest sources of power. Because when a person learns to stand peacefully in their own company, they stop settling for relationships. This requires courage. Many people spend their entire lives wearing masks. They present different versions of themselves depending on who is watching. They change their opinions to gain acceptance. They hide parts of themselves to avoid judgment. They constantly monitor how others see them. The empath who is awakened through pain becomes tired of this game. She understands that pretending is exhausting. She understands that constantly seeking approval creates anxiety. She understands that the more she chases validation, the more disconnected she becomes from her true self. So she makes a different choice. She begins trusting herself. At first, this trust develops slowly. She starts listening to her own intuition. She starts respecting her own feelings. She starts making decisions based on what aligns with her values, rather than what earns the most praise. This inner trust becomes a foundation that cannot easily be shaken because external validation is unstable. One day people applaud you, the next day they criticize you. One moment they support your choices, the next moment they question them. If your confidence depends entirely on the reactions of others, your emotional state will constantly rise and fall. The empath begins to see this. Clearly, she realizes that true confidence is not built on approval. True confidence is built on self-respect. Self-respect means keeping promises to yourself. It means honoring your boundaries. It means standing by your principles, even when it would be easier not to. It means recognizing your own value without needing constant confirmation from the outside world. As this understanding deepens, something remarkable happens. The opinions of others lose their power over her. This does not mean she becomes arrogant. It does not mean she stops listening to feedback. It does not mean she believes she is always right. It simply means she no longer allows the judgments of others to determine her worth. She can receive criticism without collapsing. She can face disagreement without becoming defensive. She can be misunderstood without feeling the need to endlessly explain herself. This emotional freedom is incredibly powerful. In case, many people are trapped by the need to be liked. As a result, they compromise their values, suppress their truth, and abandon their own needs. The healed empath refuses to live this way. She understands that being respected is more important than being liked. She understands that authenticity attracts the right people and naturally distances the wrong ones. She understands that peace comes from alignment with herself, not from universal approval. Those around her often notice this change. There is a new confidence in the way she carries herself, a quiet strength, a calm certainty. She no longer seeks attention because she is no longer searching for proof of her worth. She no longer performs for acceptance because she already accepts herself. She no longer feels compelled to convince others of her value because she has already recognized it within herself. This is why her transformation surprises so many people. They expected her to continue seeking permission. They expected her to continue needing reassurance. They expected her to continue measuring her. They expected her to continue measuring herself through the eyes of others. Instead, they find someone who has discovered an entirely different source of strength, a strength that comes from within, a strength that remains steady whether she is praised or criticized, a strength that allows her to walk her own path with dignity and peace. And once she learns to validate herself, she becomes impossible to control through the opinions of others. As a female empath stops seeking validation from the outside world, she begins to discover a deeper source of stability within herself. This is where another powerful transformation takes place. She develops unshakable inner peace through discipline and awareness. Many people believe peace is something that appears when life becomes easy, when problems disappear, or when everyone around them behaves the way they want. But a hurt empath who has learned from her experiences begins to understand a different truth. Peace is not something found in perfect circumstances. Peace is something cultivated within. For much of her life, her emotional state may have been influenced by the people around her. Because empaths are naturally sensitive, they often absorb the energy of their environment. When others were happy, she felt uplifted. When others were struggling, she carried their burdens. When conflict arose, she felt the tension deeply. This sensitivity is not a weakness, but without awareness, it can leave a person feeling emotionally exhausted and constantly reactive to the world around them. After experiencing disappointment, betrayal, and heartbreak, the empath eventually realizes that she cannot control what happens outside of herself. She cannot control how She cannot control whether others are honest, loyal, or respectful. She cannot control every challenge life places in her path, but she can control how she responds. This realization becomes the foundation of inner peace. Most suffering is not created by circumstances alone. It is created by the endless battle against reality. People suffer because they want things to be different from what they are. They resist what has already happened. They replay painful moments repeatedly in their minds. They argue internally with situations they cannot change. The empath who is growing in awareness begins to see this pattern within herself. She notices how much energy is wasted resisting reality. She notices how often her mind returns to old wounds. She notices how frequently fear pulls her into imagined futures that do not even exist. This awareness is important because you cannot change what you do not see. For the first time, she begins observing her thoughts instead of blindly believing them. She notices that not every thought deserves her attention. She notices that emotions come and go like passing clouds. She notices that feelings are temporary even when they seem overwhelming in the moment. This understanding creates space between her awareness and her emotions. Instead of becoming consumed by every feeling, she learns to witness them. Instead of reacting immediately, she learns to pause. Instead of allowing temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions, she develops patience. This is where discipline enters the picture. Many people think discipline only applies to physical training or work, but some of the greatest discipline a person can develop is mental and emotional discipline. The empath begins practicing small acts of self-mastery every day. She disciplines herself to stop feeding negative thought patterns. She disciplines herself to walk away from unnecessary drama. She disciplines herself to protect her attention from things that disturb her peace. She disciplines herself to focus on what she can control instead of obsessing over what she cannot. At first, these practices seem simple, but over time, they transform her entire life. Every day she chooses awareness over impulsiveness. She becomes stronger. Every day she chooses presence over worry. She becomes calmer. Every day she chooses acceptance over resistance. She becomes more peaceful. Gradually, her inner world begins to change. The chaos that once dominated her mind starts to settle. The emotional storms become less intense. The need to react to every situation begins to fade. People around her notice this transformation. Situations that once upset her no longer have the same effect. Criticism no longer shakes her confidence. Disappointments no longer destroy her sense of self. Unexpected challenges no longer send her into panic. Why? Because her stability is no longer dependent on external circumstances. She has built an internal foundation. Imagine a mountain standing through changing seasons. Storms arrive, winds blow, rain falls, snow covers its surface. Yet the mountain remains grounded because its strength comes from its foundation. The empath begins developing a similar quality. Yet life still presents challenges, people still disappoint her, unexpected problems still appear. But she is no longer easily moved by every passing storm. Her peace comes from within. This peace is not passive, it is not weakness, it is not avoidance, it is strength in its purest form. Because remaining calm in difficult moments requires far more power than reacting impulsively. Remaining present requires more strength than escaping reality. Remaining centered requires more courage than becoming consumed by fear. As awareness deepens, she begins appreciating the present moment in a way she never did before. She notices simple things: the quiet of the morning, the rhythm of her breath, the beauty of nature, the value of stillness. She no longer believes happiness exists somewhere in the future waiting to be achieved. She understands that life is happening now. This realization brings tremendous freedom. The constant pressure to prove herself begins to disappear. The need to control every outcome begins to fade. She becomes the strongest version of herself and walks forward without looking back. This is the moment that truly shocks everyone. Not because she becomes someone else, but because she finally becomes who she was always meant to be. For a long time, much of her energy was tied to the past. She replayed conversations. She analyzed mistakes. She questioned her decisions. She wondered why certain people treated her the way they did. She searched for explanations. Like many sensitive souls, she believed that if she could just understand everything perfectly, she would finally find peace. But growth teaches her something profound. Not every question requires an answer. Not every wound requires an explanation. Not every chapter deserves to be reopened. At some point, healing requires a decision, the decision to move forward. This does not mean she forgets what happened. It does not mean she pretends the pain never existed. It simply means she stops allowing the past to control her future. Many people remain trapped because they keep looking behind them. They carry old disappointments into new opportunities. They bring yesterday's fears into today's decisions. They continue fighting battles that ended years ago. The transformed empath chooses a different path. She understands that life moves in one direction, forward, and so does she. This decision creates an incredible shift in her energy. Instead of focusing on what was lost, she begins focusing on what can be built. Instead of dwelling on who left, she concentrates on who she is becoming. Instead of mourning every closed door, she starts noticing the opportunities that exist ahead of her. There is power in this mindset. When a person is constantly attached to the past, they cannot fully embrace the present. Their attention remains divided. Their energy remains scattered. Their growth remains limited. But when the empath releases the weight she has been carrying, she experiences something extraordinary. She feels lighter, not because her journey was easy, but because she no longer carries unnecessary burdens. The resentment is gone. The need to prove herself is gone. The desire to be understood by everyone is gone. The fear of standing alone is gone. In their place stands a woman who knows herself, a woman who trusts herself, a woman who respects herself. This self-respect becomes visible in everything she does. She no longer settles for relationships that require her to shrink. She no longer accepts treatment that violates her values. She no longer sacrifices her peace to maintain connections that drain her spirit. The standards she now lives by are different, not because she believes she is better than others, but because she finally understands her worth. This understanding changes the way she moves through the world. People who once underestimated her begin noticing her confidence. People who once took her for granted begin recognizing her absence. People who once expected unlimited access to her energy realize that she now chooses carefully where her attention goes. And yet, the most remarkable change is not external, it is internal. And she no longer feels the need to win every argument. She no longer feels the need to defend every choice. She no longer feels the need to convince others of her value. She knows who she is. And that knowledge creates freedom. There is a quiet strength that develops when a person becomes fully aligned with themselves. It is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not demand recognition. It simply exists. The empath begins carrying this strength naturally. She enters rooms without needing approval. She makes decisions without excessive doubt. She pursues her goals without waiting for permission. She trusts the wisdom she has gained through experience. This confidence is different from arrogance. Arrogance seeks superiority. Confidence seeks authenticity. Arrogance depends on comparison. Confidence depends on self-awareness. The transformed empath has no interest in proving she is stronger than anyone else. Her focus is becoming stronger than the person she used to be. This is why her transformation is so powerful. She has stopped fighting external battles and started mastering the internal ones. She